Hello, and welcome back to Conversations with Dental Friends, the go-to podcast for dental professionals looking to elevate, redefine, and level up their careers. This week, we're shifting gears a bit and diving into the side of dentistry we don't always talk about. I don't anyway, management and leadership in a corporate setting. I'm joined by Penny Chapman, Area Manager for Bupa Dental Care in Northern Ireland, who has built an incredible career within the corporate dental world. Penny has held a variety of roles within Bupa, and today she's giving us an inside look at what it takes to step into management within a corporate structure and the career pathways available, and how opportunities exist for both dental and non-dental professionals looking to transition into leadership. So if you're curious about the corporate structure of dentistry, want to explore management roles, or if you're already a manager and you're looking to maximise your potential, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Hello, Penny.
Hi, Rachel.
Welcome to Conversations with Dental Friends. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast today. The first time I saw Penny's was in Bupa Dental Care in Lisburn, behind the reception desk. And you said to me, my favourite thing to hear, you're fully booked for today. And that was my absolute favourite. And I always remember that that's how I met you. And now you are here in this very different role within the Bupa organisation. Let's start with your career journey. How did you get into the dental world, and what steps have led you to your current role as area manager with Bupa?
Yeah, that's a lovely memory, Rachel. I never remember those days. I don't quite remember that exact thing, but that's just how impactful that was to you in that day. And how it's so important.
Yes, it wasn't very often. I was completely fully earned at that practice, so that was a very
memorable moment.
It was
exciting. That must have been good 8 or 9 years ago now. So I started in dentistry 13 years ago, and how I got into dentistry back in them days, jobs were advertised in newspapers.
Yes.
So there was a little tiny ad for a dental receptionist for a brand new practice that was opening in Lisburn. Not the one I had the pleasure of meeting you in, but in Lisburn. And it was a company called Smiles Dental, and we would now know them as the Republic of Ireland brand to Bupa. And at that stage, I was a department manager for Next.
Right.
And had been...
So retail coming into dental.
And actually, they work very well together. They genuinely do. But I didn't know that at that time. And I had loved my time at Next and where I had worked previous to that. Very much encouraged in development of space, learned a lot around leading people and how to motivate someone who works 4 hours on a Saturday as opposed to 40 hours during the week, and very different strains of people, and a real great training ground. And I didn't obviously come into dentistry at that stage as management. I had done probably one too many 3:30 a.m. next sales starts at that stage. And I just thought, you know what, I can't. Exactly. And my goodness, they're fabulous. And I missed the bargains because the staff used to rip through everything before it went to the public. So you got great bargains. But I was exhausted, if I'm honest. And it was a little bit of a rat race that I knew that if I stayed on that treadmill where I was going, and it was not really anywhere. So I just thought, I'll try my hand to something else. And seeing this ad for dental receptionists, never having worked in dentistry, never having been a receptionist. So I didn't stand much of a chance, but I went for a job interview with the guy who owned the company at that stage, a guy called Emmett. And I had my interview in the lobby of the Premier Inn in Lisburn.
How glamorous.
Honestly, it was just up and up and up and up, you know. And that was a really interesting interview. Asked nothing about capability. It really was I very much felt it was they're just trying to see were you the right personality to join their company.
Mm-hmm. And personality is so important from a welcome team point of view.
Right, you know, it's that whole will and skill piece, isn't it? You know, and you can teach someone how to answer the phone in which way you want them to answer the phone, but if they don't answer it with a smile, there's not a whole lot you can do. You know, you'll be fighting a losing battle there. So I obviously got that job. And really from there, 13 years later, my goodness, it has been busy and interesting and full of new opportunities, and I just fell in love with dentistry. So I ended up working in the practice that you came to work in, because whenever Oasis bought Smiles, they already had a clinic in Lisbon, so they merged the two together.
That's right.
And that was an interesting period. Probably not not amazing things. Really, it was a difficult time for us at that stage. Really difficult takeover. I was really happy when Bupa bought Oasis. It felt much more opportunistic, much more positive for a patient journey.
Absolutely, I agree.
Interesting.
You definitely had, I feel like whenever Oasis became Bupa,
It was a very different vibe.
it was a very different vibe.
Yeah.
As somebody who's transversed that period of time as well.
And it's difficult being acquired, Rachel, because, you know, that's twice now in my 13-year period my payroll number's been sold, you know, and on you go. And each has brought such opportunities for me that I can only be grateful. I'm having no more children because every time I go on maternity leave, I get a new job. So that's I'm done. I'm done there. Yes, I went maternity leave, and when I came back, I started in as a practice manager then in our Banbridge clinic, and done that for a few years. Then went on another maternity leave, came back as a role we don't actually have at the minute, an area support manager, sort of a deputy area manager, and that was a great training ground. And I was really championed by Zara Doyle, who would have been the area manager at the time. So just, you know, that whole empowered women and empower other women.
I love that. And I think Bupa is actually great for that, because we are such a female strong force in dentistry that we can't help but help each other. And we all have that sort of fondness for each other that we all really want. I feel in Bupa, as I've worked previously Oasis, then Bupa for many, many years, that we do champion each other as women within the corporate practice.
Yeah, we feel that too.
Did you always see yourself in this kind of management role, or was that more of a gradual evolution over time? You mentioned there that you were in Next.
Yeah.
I suppose there are a lot of transferable skills, which is a bit of a tangent now, but what do you feel the transferable skills would be from going from retail to something like dental, if somebody's working in retail but feels that they would branch out into other avenues?
Yeah. It's all people.
Yeah.
It's you know, and that's where I said it was a really good sort of training ground. It's knowing how to adapt your communication style to various people and never figuring out what someone else's why is absolutely critical to being able to lead them. And I didn't right when I was leaving school, I'd love to go and work in dentistry, otherwise I probably would have done dentistry. It was never really there. If I could go back and have my time again, I would be a midwife.
Yes.
And I did look into doing that. I did go back to school for a little while, and then one of my babies came along, and that was the end of that. It was like, just go back to work. And reality kicks in. But I think no matter what job I've had, it may have started as a job, but I've been invariably ended up in some kind of leadership role. And I think that is just that people. It's just having warmth for people and being able to engage with people and working hard. You know,
some people just naturally fit that arc, don't they? Yeah. The dental industry is evolving so fast, and we're seeing so many changes now. Personally, in my role as a dental hygienist, we've moved as a company to Dentally, which is very new for us. There's new equipment available all the time. AI is now becoming a bigger thing. Yeah. What do you think has had the biggest impact on the way that you work?
For me, it is undeniably the COVID pandemic.
Yes,
and I really, really wish it wasn't. I really wish we were able to talk about something else, but it's so...
We can't help but talk about COVID in data.
And 5 years, you know, from our first lockdown, it's actually quite hair-raising, isn't it? You know, to think of that. I think it changed how people work. And if we're talking about impact in my role, you know, the day-to-day challenges for me and what kind of fundamentally made dentistry different was everybody in that time felt the need to review their work-life balance.
Absolutely.
And rightly so. Yes. You know, that I completely understand why that's happened. But we did, you know, nearly every dentist dropped a day. Catastrophic from an access perspective to a patient. But really, really challenging in practice. Led to a lot of vacancies that weren't actually leaver-created vacancies, but were created by people reducing their hours.
Yes.
Really fundamentally changed how we work. So you almost need double the dental heads to fill the same hours, and that is really a significant challenge. And we need to face into it a little bit. And it's interesting that kind of at the 5-year point, there are more hours coming back from certain people, which is sad to see and I'm glad to see. I think,
Yes.
it's like, well, what didn't work out for you there? You thought that was going to be achievable. And then in the same year, we lost 5 dentists to Australia. There was a lot of movement. Yes, a lot of movement. There's 3 in the same year went to salaried roles in various teaching hospitals. Some moved to England, different things. And then we also had people who didn't want to be locked down again on their own and moved home. There were foreign nationals living here, working here, and they moved home. So we did see a huge amount of movement in that space. But just that whole mindset piece of work-life balance, which is to be applauded in so many ways, has probably created the biggest adjustment and the biggest challenge to my day-to-day of how do I keep access flowing appropriately for patient care.
Absolutely. I think that, and it's so interesting how you've said so many clinicians have looked at their work-life balance because we can't work from home. As much as that, I mean, I think having a patient in your living room would be, a nice idea until the patient's in your living room. So I do think that that's really interesting that so many clinicians have had that little moment of revision, but then now might be coming back into exploring options for hours. And of course, we've got cost of living. Yeah. I've just increased my hours with Bupa where I work, and fantastic that we have the scope and availability and the willingness of a patient base to do that. The demand is there. Dentistry is intense. It is an intense profession, high pressure environment, which I think a lot of people don't really understand, not only affects the clinician in the chair, but the wider dental team as a whole. How do you personally manage stress and keep that balance? What keeps you motivated and showing up with a smile every day to work? Because you are very smiley.
Thank you. I think that's a really difficult question, because I don't think anybody can really answer that honestly and have a cheery answer. It's something we could all work a little bit harder on, I suppose, or a little bit better, have a better outcome. It is a really stressful environment, but also I really love it. I like, probably a bit odd, really love it. And I love it more than a lot of dentists I've spoken to, interestingly, about what I get, how that can wax and wane. I work with a really great couple of dentists really, really early on in my career who invested so much time in making sure I knew stuff and the right terminology and got excited about it and all the rest. So that's really helped, really, really helps. Why could I do this job in another industry? Of course I could. Would I want to? No. I really love it. I love that it's a bit more than making profit. I love that it's so patient focused, and it really draws on my passion for a good customer experience, and that those two things are mirrored. And I always talk to my team about how the terminology of patient and customer is always really triggering for a clinical person.
Yes.
And it really shouldn't be, because they're a patient when they're in your chair, but at every other stage in the journey, they're a customer. And so we have to be really excellent with our gold standard customer service. And so it all kind of pulls together. Even with people pleaser, I didn't realise it. I don't know. I'm just thinking about this now. But pulling all those strains together, I think, make this a really cracking industry. And you're able to do something to it, like the skill. I carry scrubs in my boot, and if there's something
just
I look at, well, I obviously am not clinical, as you are fully aware, but I'm just so fascinated. I was privileged to have an implant dentist take some time with me and allow me to witness a sinus lift. Amazing, nurses haven't seen that yet.
Yes.
Well, I was in the corner of the room and he was like, you can't stay over there, go over here.
So even I find sinus lifts difficult, and I am living for blood. Like some days I have blood on my forehead, and I do find a sinus lift a challenge. So I was sinus lift's a brave one.
You know what? I just have such admiration for the industry. I know we call them oral surgeons, but they're actually surgeons of the oral cavity. It's incredible, and how you can work in that such a small space. So I think there's a lot of admiration personally from me to the professionals in the industry, and then the love for having a really good patient care experience. That's kind of what keeps me turning up every day with wanting to do a good job for all of you. To me, my job is to make your job as pain-free as possible. Sometimes I get that right, sometimes probably I don't, and that's I'm open to that challenge, that's fine. But I turn up wanting to do a good job for you, and I think that's what keeps it going. So the stress levels varies from day to day, but ultimately I want to be here, and that's what makes it worthwhile. And then you just find a way to manage the rest. The children take up the rest of what's left of my stress calorie.
Exactly. You do have a ceiling limit to what you can take on in a day, where you do just have to smile through it and understand that we do work in a very high pressure environment. that's never going to change, and we need to adapt and address that. What would you sort of touched on it a little bit there in what you've said, because so much of management is people management now, like it or lump it. What would you say is the most challenging part of your job as an area manager?
It's funny because people are always the most challenging, but equally the most rewarding element. Yes. So I find that quite difficult to pigeon them as being the most difficult, because it's the bit that I love and it's the bit where your skills are stretched and all of those things. But I think probably the most difficult thing is I never feel like I finish anything. The team in Northern Ireland, my direct reports have 20, which is
20 is huge.
A big direct report for this level of line management it is.
And that's a lot of time to devote to 20 people. Like, say, if each person gets an hour of your time a week, that's 20 hours of a work week. Mm-hmm. That's a lot to judge.
20 week of most people's work week, yes. I think then the wider team is 350, and I really pride myself on being able to walk into any clinic and know 90% of the names, and they know me, and I know the dog's called or that the kids started school or things like that. So all of those things, being able to kind of have that relationship across the wider teams is really, really important to me. And some places it's really great because I will have had more exposure to that clinic for whatever reason. And other places it's a little bit more missed and hit because I haven't been there as much, and usually they're the practices that fly under the radar and there's not much happens in there, as in like there's not much noise, because that's the reality. I tend to be pulled to where the noise is,
good or bad.
Exactly. Usually bad, because it's like, oh, I can't fix that myself, can you come and help me now? And that can be the challenging thing, where it's great that you're in a position to be able to hopefully fix most of these things, which is a very privileged position to be in.
Amazing. And we need that. There are things that to me as a clinician, a separate independent clinician who works in one of 20, that I go to you directly for, which does add to a very full plate. Yeah. And I do always appreciate that. But I think that's...
But I don't ever want you to feel like you couldn't come to me. That's
the relationship we
exactly, and that's exactly what I'm here for. A real trigger of mine is, oh, I thought you were busy, or I didn't want to come and speak to you because I thought you'd be busy. Well, I am busy, but you're going to wait a really long time if you're waiting for the 5 minutes that I'm not busy. Yes. You just need to come and put yourself on my radar, and I will be absolutely delighted to help have a conversation. Just grab a coffee. It doesn't need to be deep and meaningful. It can. Those touch points are really important, but equally, I've maybe had my head down for hours doing something really boring, and actually I'm going to really welcome the conversation with you as well. Whereas on paper maybe that conversation felt a little bit like touch, but actually it was so needed for all parties. So yes, Nikki, it's just people are everything, literally everything. So there's no conversation not worthwhile having. So the challenge can be, as the both trying to split myself and make sure that everybody feels like getting good quality. I'd never want you to feel like I'd rushed a conversation with you, and sometimes that's the challenge. That's really hard to navigate, because in the back of my head I'm thinking of something else coming up, or I need to be online for 11:30 for a call or whatever, but you're the priority in the moment. The same as that's probably not any different to you treating patients. I'm thinking about the next one who's waiting in the waiting room, but the one that's right there in the chair in that moment is a priority.
Such a good comparison that I've never really thought about before, because that's exactly what goes on in your head as a clinician as well, and it's so interesting to see that similarity and perspective. Looking back over your time with Bupa, you've been with Bupa for 13 years now, in various different roles. What has been your proudest achievement that you would say so far over your Bupa career, or your smiles into Oasis, into Bupa career? And we discussed this actually, and it's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, it's so difficult. There's been lots of highlights. I think, although highlights is not what you're asking, proudest moment. I think if I were to take a moment to be really reflect inward, it's not a moment as such, but I would say that I have, I think I handle myself well. So handle myself with grace and 100% position things in the right way and with authenticity, and I show up being the best version of myself as hopefully most days, but as often as I can muster. And I think that has carried me well through Bupa, but also through building relationships. And I think it makes me then a really good conduit between the clinics, being individual clinics, and the perception of the corporate.
Yes.
And I say perception of the corporate very deliberately, because Bupa is just a company of people, and people are making decisions, and people are turning up every day trying to do their best. And he's like, it's the best place I've ever worked, honestly, really the best place I've ever worked, and I have no desire to ever leave, so I'll be here as long as they want, me to be here. But that,
you and me both.
But exactly, yeah, which I'm delighted about. But I think that kind of being that person that I don't want you to think, oh, I need to ask Bupa about that. I want you to be comfortable saying, I can ask Penny about that. And that's the same thing, because in our relationship, I am Bupa.
Yes.
And it's just trying to get that thing. So I think I hope somebody's going to tell you afterwards, she definitely didn't get that right, but I hope I've got that right. I hope I work hard on that and have made that really tangible in practices when I'm out and about and speaking to people. But also I really feel like I show up in the right way time and time again. And I think that's why opportunities have come along. And, you know, I really invest time in stakeholder relationships, to use a bit of corporate talk.
Yes.
So, you know, lots of our external providers, I have an excellent relationship with them all, because I need them and they need me. And why would I not have a good conversation with them or take them for a coffee a couple of times a year? Those things are really, really important. But they allow for an easier working relationship for everybody. And I feel like I do that quite well, both internally and externally, because the expectation that Bupa have of me is that I run our business in Northern Ireland without too much of a hiccup.
Yeah.
And that I feel a real sense of responsibility there, but also, my goodness, what a privilege. And I hope when I look back over my career, the whole Bupa piece becomes the moment of pride.
Yes.
And that I can look back on.
That's really...
I don't know if I answered that in the way you know I do that.
No, I think that's really lovely. I think sometimes I find it easier. This is a bit of a tangent again. But sometimes I find it easier working for a corporate. I've worked across corporate and family business. When I work within the Bupa corporation, I have a touch points there. There's something different that a corporate brings to the table. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like whenever it's a family business, there's a huge amount of emotional investment from everybody, because you're involved in so many ways. And sometimes having the corporate environment feels like it's easier to have a discussion with you about X, Y, Z, because you're not directly responsible for X, Y, Z, and it doesn't always feel as like emotionally invested in a really, really good way. Mm-hmm. I am thinking now about our fantastic nurses within Bupa and beyond, or our fantastic welcome team within Bupa and beyond, that maybe feel like they've done the role for a certain amount of time, as you did, and they feel like they have a bit more potential, a little bit more to give, maybe to move into a management role. What steps would you suggest that they take, or what advice would you give them for somebody who isn't currently a manager but is looking to move forward into some level of management?
I think it starts with some really simple stuff. You have to know that. So you have to look inwardly. Nobody hands your career to you on a plate.
Absolutely.
You have to carry in fact, a high volume of personal responsibility in that space. But also you have to be really open to feedback. Not everybody can lead a team. So being a manager and being a leader are two very different things. To sound like a cliche, I do apologise, but it's true. Things are cliches and things are true.
It is true.
And you can, the best leader in your nursing team might not be your lead nurse. It's that person who's always setting the example, always the person going, what can I do next? Setting the tone, going up above and beyond. That kind of person's going to pave the way. And they're naturally like that. They're not doing it
exactly
for agenda. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or because a job suddenly became advertised and suddenly they just like that become your best nurse. And you're like, we can see through this. They have that natural sort of ability to adapt to the situation, and to, whenever you think about every practice you've ever worked in, I'm sure there's a nurse in every practice that comes to mind, or a front of house staff member that comes to mind as being, they were just brilliant. Now, the challenge is getting that brilliant person to marry up with wanting to do more and wanting to be a lead and wanting to move into different positions, because sometimes they don't and they're happy doing their own thing, and that is absolutely fine. They can just be the best version of themselves in that role. So I think you've got to be personally responsible for your career journey. You have to know what you want. It's not helpful to sit in a review with your manager and say, I want more, but what does that look like? Oh, I don't know.
Yes. You need that awareness there.
You need to know what grabs your own curiosity and your own interests.
Or never speak up And say, sometimes I find that there are very good people that would maybe reflect back over their time with any business, and they've worked there for a long time, and they say, I've never been approached, or I've never been there. You need to kind of knock at the door and say,
and you're an expert in that space, aren't you? You know, which is amazing. I love that, because I am very clear on what your objectives are, Rachel, you know, and that is helpful to me, because when I can't read your mind, and you have to tell me. So I think, yes, it's not, as long as they're having that conversation with their line manager and they're then listening to feedback and they're in a good relationship where that can be helped and be happening, we have an array of resources. But again, when I go back to personal responsibility, you can't expect to do that when someone FTAs and you end up with an hour free. You've got, you know, what are you doing in your own time? What are you doing in your own space? What does the conversation look like at home for your own development? You know, there's just so much kind of pulls together. So showing up with the right attitude, being a leader.
Attitude is essential.
Oh my goodness, you know, and just generally just being a good person, a good chairside assistant, a good front of house, wanting to do a good job, showing up with the right attitude, showing up where, and you know, I had a meeting with a group of front of house team at the end of last year, and I said, I hate to break it to you, but the patient doesn't care if you had a bad day.
Yes.
And that's the truth.
They never should know.
Never know. And sometimes my goodness, I'm definitely guilty of it. I wear my emotions on my face. I don't need to open my mouth for someone to know exactly what I'm thinking.
Yes.
And I'm constantly trying to work on that, you know, but we see that a lot at desk, where I'll arrive into practice and it's very clear that X person has not had a great morning, or was stuck in traffic, or something happened, or the kids got in trouble, or whatever, all those life things. The patient does not care. So we care. Back of house, we care, and we should all be caring for each other. But that being able to show up day after day after day, because you'll need that for longevity.
Alien.
Correct. Yeah. So I think you have that as well. And then just hard work. It does not come easy. No, you know that. Yeah, I know that. You've got to put the hours in. You've got to put the effort in. And I think if you can do that, you've got a good melting pot. You've got a good recipe in that melting pot, and things will come good, and things will come at the right time. And also, you must learn from the rejections, because not everything is for you.
Yes.
And that's okay. And I think we unfortunately live in a little bit of a culture where the no's feel like that should never have been a no. And actually, the no's are quite powerful.
I think the no's set
in the right direction. In the right way, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think within Bupa, or any sort of corporate environment, is a really great place to progress and train, because you will receive training that you can do within the company's time, within those aspects of your job that corporations like Bupa will be hugely supportive in.
Absolutely.
In terms of different programs, progression into management, CPD generally. So I think that Bupa is great with that side of things. And I would definitely say, at a time whenever we are losing good nurses and good people on in areas of their career that they feel want to move forward, there is always going to be some sort of a role for you.
Yeah.
If you want it to move within the wider dental industry as a whole.
You want them to flourish. We should be creating an environment where people can meet the threshold of their capability and development as per their objectives.
Yes.
And allow people to flourish. And I do think we do a good job of that. I think you're absolutely right. And I look at my direct team of practice managers, half of them are nurses.
Yeah.
And some of them not nurses with Bupa, they've come from other businesses, but the majority nurses with Bupa. And that's really interesting. It makes me feel very privileged, because I've got the perfect blend in the team, you know, and each person has the things that are really strong for them and the things that they need to work on. Half the team have a clinical background, and the other half are what I will term a business background. So they come from an industry that's similar to me, whatever.
Well.
But do you see when you put them in a room? Oh my goodness. And they're absolutely amazing at holding each other to account. I couldn't have a room of 19 commercial brains or 19 nursing brains. I need them both, because that's the nature. You know, we have to yes, we're here from a healthcare perspective, and we absolutely are, and I feel very strongly about that, but we also have to keep the doors open. So we need to be able to have the conversation and be comfortable having the conversation. So it's a really interesting mix, and it's something that I always consider whenever a team is coming together. Maybe somebody moves on and they need to replace. It's like, well, where do you fit in my team? So you're trying to make that match with the practice. Is that the right person for that practice and that team and those personalities as well? Because you want it to be a success. It's no... Listen, I don't want to spend my time recruiting people. It has to be the first time round, or it just causes problems for everybody. But equally, I'll also look at that individual to say, do you fit my team of direct reports? How are you going to get in with those people? And what can you bring to the team that we don't have yet?
Yes.
And that's where it gets quite exciting. So you have to be open-minded about different skill sets. I know from a clinical perspective, some of the conversations that I've had over the years have been, I just want a nursing manager. You can't, please don't give me a business manager. I just want somebody who knows dentistry. And that's great for knowing what kit you need ordered.
Yes.
It's not that great whenever you've got an HR issue in practice.
Which there can be often.
Exactly. So it's just being able to fine-tune and hone those skills for everybody and know what everybody needs. And then they become an absolutely a powerhouse of a collective together, which I'm really proud of.
I love that. I think that's brilliant. And hopefully we will continue to see some really great members of staff move through the company. Penny, you have mentioned already how you really enjoy working for Bupa, and you do see yourself working for Bupa long term. What's your vision for the future, not just for yourself, but also for the future of dentistry as a whole?
Mm-hmm. I think the future of dentistry one I'll take first. It's been a really transformative period in the industry. I feel over this past kind of, even a little bit pre-COVID, but kind of 5-10 years. But also, I've now been in the industry long enough to see the cycle. So I've seen the flip.
So beneficial.
Oh my goodness, so beneficial. Yeah, it allows you to avoid the pitfalls of snap decisions, and
I love that. It's so difficult to rise up and look at something holistically, and I think that's so wise to have a reflective look on things.
Yeah, it's really beneficial, and I think having that longer eye, I suppose, over the horizon is really good for everybody. But it's possibly, now linking it back to a comment you made earlier around kind of having that non-emotional reaction to stuff.
Yes,
is potentially helpful in this situation. Now, I do react emotively to things. I don't want you to think I'm a robot, but in terms of decision making, it's not my business in the same way as a principal owned. That is my business, and I must react now, and I'm for survival, etc.
Absolutely.
So the benefit of the security of being in a network like Bupa is helpful to making those long-term decisions.
Yes.
But equally, my longevity in the industry and seeing those cycles come and go, and whenever somebody opens their health service books the queues for 3 miles down the road to get access, and suddenly then when that happens, the private world drops off and everybody starts taking a health service list back. So I think the balance book isn't quite where I think it should be. Yeah, I think it'll come. I do think that if I'm talking about my vision for dentistry, maybe this is, I don't know, maybe I'm living in a world of rainbows and unicorns.
I think it's nice to live out.
Yeah, I like it. It's nice. It's not the best. That will be, I think the idea. I really feel very strongly about there being a place for health service dentistry. It needs to be appropriately funded.
100%.
We can all have that conversation till the cows come home after having that conversation for 13 years. But it needs to be appropriately funded. However, I do think the access should be there. It provides volume of patient. And if we can manage that properly, it creates the right space for discussing full treatment options with patients. And then we get a far better balance. But we're there in a much better space. If I think about what our diaries would have looked like, even 4 or 5 years ago compared to what they look like now, pretty even Stevens from a health service and private perspective. And so we get happier dentists, we get happier nurses, we get happier patients.
Yes.
So the vibe is different in practice. It's not that rat race of 30 patients a day every 10 minutes, which is just not great. So
not sustainable.
No, absolutely not sustainable in any description of the word. And I think that would be the idea. We could really master that and hone that. And maybe we're not too far away. I don't know. I don't think the NHS is a big bad wolf either. I think it does have a place. I do think it has a place. It's just, where is that place? And then how do we get patient buy-in to the concept of private dentistry rather than I'm having to go private because I can't get a health service patient. And then the second health service place opens up somewhere else, that private patient's away because they've no loyalty. They just were your patient because they've no choice. So
you don't want people to be resentful of private. Correct. You want people to understand
the value
is valuable.
Yes. So I think there's a place for it all. It's how you get it, man. You know, maybe I am in the land of unicorns and rainbows. Maybe I am, but I do think there's a place for it all, and I think we can marry it together probably a little bit better than we're managing now, but it's very much on a journey. So that, I think, the future of dentistry is really, really exciting, and we start to think about technology. And it's what I find fascinating about this industry from a dentistry perspective, and extracting a tooth or doing a fill-in or doing a root canal or a hygiene appointment, it probably textbook-wise doesn't change that much.
Yes.
And so to think that you could have something that stays fairly similar from decade to decade from a technical perspective, to then be able to add in and go, do you know what, actually no, let's throw that rule book away and start doing all of these other really exciting things. And if I can get you this piece of kit, it makes RCT significantly more pleasant for the patient and quicker for the dentist, and then you start thinking about EMS and hygiene and all of these other exciting things. I'm like, oh my goodness, actually what could have been routine, and then it becomes a little bit dull. No, hang on. We don't accept that.
Places we will go
exactly
are incredible.
Yes,
are incredible. Well, Penny, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure for you to be here and have this conversation with me today. I got so much out of it. I feel like anybody working within Bupa, but also Bupa and beyond, will have got so much out of this chat, which is brilliant. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
It's been lovely.
No problem. Thank you. What a fascinating conversation. It's so refreshing to look at the dental world from a management perspective, and a huge thank you to Penny for sharing her insights with us today. She made some really brilliant points about the key skills needed for leadership, how to put yourself forward for management opportunities, and why communication of your goals is just so important. I know that's going to have so many of you thinking differently about your career paths come Monday morning. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, review and leave a comment. It really helps this content reach more dental professionals. And if you find it valuable, share it with someone in your dental community who might benefit from hearing Penny's advice. For updates, behind the scenes content and more conversations like this, head over to @conversationswithdentalfriends on Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I'm Rachel. You can also find me on Instagram @homegirlhygienist. And as always, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week for another episode.